Oh, says, yes, Steve, you need a raise. I know. I know. Call the powers that be now. Be my manager, Mo Gaines. Be my manager. Battle for me. All right? Just saying. Mo Gaines. Okay, let's get the results going there.
Ragoobarsingh, I have 25 votes. How many do you have?
I had 24, so maybe you are right. I may have
Yeah, I have
missed most
25
one.
votes. Yeah, I just counted the last two Steve gave there. 25 votes.
Okay.
So the question this morning was,
Do you think that acting commissioner of police, McDonald Jacob, should backtrack and apologize for his original statement on the shooting death of PC Jelks in light of the autopsy report? That was our poll this morning.
so we had 25 persons responding to the poll. 4 persons said no, he should not apologize or backtrack. But 21 persons said yes, he should apologize and backtrack the statement.
Yep.
Because you see, the statement put that young man in a very precarious position, and I'm not saying that the young man may, or cameras, the young man may not be of interest to the police, but certainly when it was said, and the hunt for the young man, it gave the impression that the young man may have been responsible for the police constable's death. And now that the autopsy report has come out, unless the young man jumped over the police and shot him from behind, it seems very unlikely that he is
Yep.
actually the person. And the new statement from the police indicates that while they're still searching for him, he is not the person now wanted for the murder, contrary to the earlier implications, and that's very serious. Because his mother was on TV saying he is not. He didn't kill the officer. The neighbors in Rich Plain, the villagers in Rich Plain were saying that is not the case. The caller earlier, I didn't hear Sergeant Inspector Alexander say it, but according to the caller earlier, Alexander was saying that it implied that he was the person. So I mean, this young man's reputation, to be alleged to have killed a police officer, is a very, very serious thing, allegation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I
So
mean, come on.
we're gonna see how it all plays out. I assume
Yeah.
he would be, because the guy, the 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 original suspect as claimed by the police,
Jelano Romney.
Jelano, has been, of course, speaking with an attorney, Kristen Williams. So I assume they will now make themselves available for an interview with regard to whatever information he may or may not have with regard to what happened to PC Jokes.
Yeah, but I think, given the autopsy report, that young man is owed an apology. Even if it's not a public apology, and it should be a public apology, he's owed an apology. Because the implications of shooting and killing a police officer are extremely dire and serious.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's no easy thing to have on your record. You know,
Yeah,
that,
and
Yeah.
and
it's
there's
on
some
the
people, in spite of the
and it,
autopsy, will still think that he's responsible because of it's already gone out into the public domain.
Yeah. Well, maybe as someone just messaged me and said, yeah, maybe the autopsy showed that maybe the bullet came from
Well, the normal
could be.
procedure in that case now, with the implications of the officer Jerks being shot from behind, is that all the officers who were on the operation, their weapons would have to be tested. You know?
yep.
The strange thing about it now is that I don't know if they took samples from the officers' hands because they were originally searching for the young man as a suspect to see if there was gunshot residue on their hands. You know, that kind of stuff, Richard, Steve?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
To see if they may have shot the weapons in search of but did they fire shots at Mr. Jelani when they were looking for him? Did they get to the point where they were in range of him to have fired shots if they think he fired shots at them? Because if the original suspicion was that he shot the officer, they would have had to be shots fired at them because the officer received a bullet. They didn't know before the autopsy it was to the back of his head, but certainly they would have probably fired back. So I mean, it's just gotten so complicated now. And will we ever really find out now who is responsible. If it was friendly fire, certainly, it may have not have been intentional. But I mean, what's next for this
Recording in
investigation?
progress.
Well,
We're gonna have to see how it all
Yep.
plays out and how
Yeah.
transparent the TTPS
and
is
how
going to be about
transparent it
it.
is. Well, but the Police Complaints Authority will also now get involved, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, they were involved before, I believe, because
Yeah.
I think they may have already been reported to by the Gelano's family.
His family.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
To
so.
get
They
an
would have made a
independent body
report.
involved.
Yeah, to get
Yeah.
so that may already be happening. Even though the PCA doesn't need to be invited there.
No,
They
they
can-
can, based on media reports, they can just take it upon themselves.
Yeah.
They
Mr.
can.
Annisette is waiting to come in, Paul.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
I'm not
hold on.
seeing him. I'm not seeing him. Did you send the invitation for him? Well, I'm not seeing him waiting to come in here. Maybe I should send it. You want to send the email to me?
Okay, no problem. I'll send it to you now.
Because I'm not seeing anybody in the waiting room. Yeah, so we're waiting, standing by to enjoin the president of NATUC, Michael Annisette, to discuss, among other things, the suggestion that the minimum wage should be revisited in light of rising the fuel prices that have now increased and the consequent expected rise in goods and services because of that. And there was a press conference held yesterday with NATUC and other trade unions. Interestingly enough, I saw Ozzy Warwick in the bank yesterday.
Santa Claus?
Of course, also connected. It's not connected, but the Ministry of Finance has certainly been very public that they have been speaking to trade unions concerning the possible lifting of the retirement age from 60 to 65. That they have consultations that are ongoing. So I suppose we could also get some feedback from Mr. Annisette concerning that and whether they were part of that consultation as claimed by the Ministry of Finance.
Okay, the email is sent, sir. Yeah, so a lot of labor stuff going on also because of the pandemic. Kind of threw labor into the labor environment into a turmoil. There were several issues that were outstanding in terms. Remember, the work from home thing never came about. The government says that they have a committee in place to look at ongoing work from home suggestions because the IR and HR implications for that. But the former Minister of Labor, remember the pandemic leave nonsense that never materialized?
Yep.
That even her Prime Minister rubbished?
Yep.
And then the ongoing suggestions and complications of not having a resolved policy for public servants, and then the government's pseudo, remember what was it called that never that was postponed and then never materialized?
The vaccination mandate, but they were saying it wasn't a mandate. They were saying it was something else. I can't remember what they were saying it was.
Yeah, but it was going to be that if you're not vaccinated in the public service, you're not going to be able to work. And there was even talk of furloughing some people.
Yep.
I forget what it was called. The pseudo safe zone. The pseudo safe zone.
Of the safe zoning of the public sector.
What you might call it.
But I never came to pass. Even though they did ask, different agencies would have asked employees to share the vaccination status. I know a lot of agencies would have done it on a voluntary basis. In other words, you weren't mandated to reveal your vaccination status.
Well, you can't force it legally. I think Mr.
So,
good morning, Michael Annisette. Thanks for joining us this morning.
It is my pleasure. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and you're listening, Buffy.
Will you be able to engage your camera, sir?
All right, yes, I
to do
will.
that? Thank you.
Yes. I might mash up.
There he is.
I might mash up the.
We have strong hardware. Don't worry. Richard is here every day.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. So
Mr. Addison. Richard Ragoobarsingh is here every day. So we have fortified, robust hardware.
Yeah.
So
welcome to the Power Breakfast Show, Michael Annisette. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. The pleasure is always mine.
Let's start the conversation with the call by NATUC and other unions for a revisiting or a relook at the minimum wage? Give us a sense of where your mindset is on that, please.
Okay, well, basically, you would have known it has been some years now since we had that change in the minimum wage, and it's not scientifically done, because you sometimes you have a spread of as much as 15, 20 years before you increase the minimum wage. And when one looks at what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to the astronomical increase in goods and services, and almost everything that the ordinary worker will have to spend money on, we are of the view that decent wages must drive your economy, and therefore there must be a need to revisit the minimum wage given all the economic realities, social realities that are facing the minimum wage workers.
The last increase in minimum wage, was it 2019? When was it? From 15
No.
to 1750. When was that?
I think it would have been that would have been about around 2013, 14. Don't hold me to the exact time, but it has been a little while. It has been recent. Yeah.
What you're saying, the platform for your intervention. Richard, go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering in terms of if they're planning, an increase in the minimum wages being discussed, is there a figure at which you expected to, is there a point at which you see the minimum wage being in these discussions? Because these are discussions that would obviously have to happen probably with the respective chambers of commerce, etc., and they will weigh in the entire issue with the government. So is there a point, a price point in terms of the figure that you see the minimum wage can go up to?
All right, no, well, we will want the minimum wage to be driven by the economic realities. The question of where the minimum wage is at presently, when we had the last increase, and do what I'll call the scientific analysis as it relates to the increase in cost of living and the ability of the very set workers to buy goods and services, because your wages is based on a basket of goods. And we are maintaining, and we believe it is only fair, that if the basket of goods at that time was $17, and because of the escalation in the cost items in the country, we must be able to evaluate that to make a determination on what point we should go in the minimum wage to maintain a level of equity and purchasing powers of those affected workers. So then it will be driven, in other words, by the science, all right, and then the doing the analytical work to really get a feel as to what is the requirement given what the analysis will call for.
How can the state and the private sector, how do you think that will be reconciled? Because the state is going to say, or has had a tendency to say, based on the global economic situation and the domestic economic situation, we may not be in a position to increase the wages bill on the state. And the private sector is more than likely going to say, well, driving up the minimum wage will drive up our cost of sales and cost of production, and it will eat into our profit line or our margins. So how are we going to reconcile it? Because I like the fact that you use the word equity. Equity means different things to different people.
All right, let me answer that. And I will want to bring it not in the technical terms, but as so it can resonate with people. I hear what you are saying, and normally that is the argument that most employers and government make, right? The economy, and it will drive up our costs, it will eat into our revenue. But the question is, to me and to NATUC and the trade union movement and the labor movement, is do we have any mechanism to control the price increases at the supermarket, at the gas station, and all the other increases that we have been seeing? And if I am working and my salary cannot meet those demands, which I have no control over, all right, and which there is no mechanism to control the price increases, because you will hear the argument that we have to let the free market reign. And if the free market reign means that because of the global crisis, the price of sugar, rice, oil, flour, butter, whatever you want to think of, chicken, meat, all these basic items has gone up. How do we now address that particular issue? Do we say that, well, we're in a global crisis? Do we analyze that we're dealing with human beings? And one must understand that the economy is driven, and I'm throwing that for the business community, by the ability of workers to purchase your goods and service. It has nothing to do with eating into your profit margin. It has to do that if I have a company and I produce goods and services, one is expected that in the production of those goods and services, that the workers, the communities will have the ability to go and purchase those goods and services.
Do you think that resonates enough? Because I think this, particularly the last 6 months of this pandemic, many of the businessmen and retailers in the food, particularly the food sector and the retail sector, have realized that the smaller the dispensable income is of the middle and lower economic groups is and are, the less they will be able to purchase your goods and services. So if the working class do not have disposable income, and it's not even disposable income for luxury item, right? Disposable income for basic stuff. Yeah. Even the fried chicken, and you use that as a classic example, because I know for a fact that the major retail chain has not been able to return to their normal margins because people just don't have the money to buy like they used to.
Well, but then that is the point that you are making. I mean, you're sounding like if you were sitting in our meeting. So welcome. All right. So that is the point that we are making, and what the analysis has been showing. The ANTRA, which is the labor group of the International Labour Organization, have been doing these kinds of research. And what is happening and what is showing is that where an economy has job-led growth, wage-led growth, the economy tends to get out of the recessionary periods much faster than if you hold on to the classical, traditional way of downplaying wages. In other words, if there isn't an injection or an infusion of monies within your economy is going to suffer. And one of the basic premise in so doing is to maintain your middle class, as you rightly say, and the minimum wage earners, who are the people who really go out there and buy the basic goods and services. All right, they don't buy luxury goods. All right, and you're talking about the KFC. If there isn't a wage increase for those groups of workers who will normally purchase KFC, what do? We're going to see a spiraling effect, or let me put it the other way, a reversal where the KFC now will have to say, because of my sales, I am not able to meet my cost. And the next thing we will be talking about is either retrenching or shutting down some of the franchises.
In the same vein that you're talking about, how should we reconcile also the fact that now increased minimum wage will also mean, it can also possibly mean, well, one, the operators raise their prices to the very consumers we're talking about, the middle class, the what should be a robust middle class, and also possible downsizing.
You see, that is what I want to call classical economic theory. But the reality on ground floor is totally different, because we have been taught, and yes, I went to Cipriani Labour College, and that is the economics that has been taught to the University Continuing School of Studies to do labor economic. But when you put salt into the wound, it is something totally different. There must be a relationship between labor and capital. right? One is not exclusive of each other. And there must be a mechanism that parties must find in order to address that concern. Because you are saying that if you increase, what is likely to happen? But I'm saying in the reverse now, that if workers do not have the monies or the wherewithal all to do the very purchasing that you are talking about, is the same effect is going to happen. So how do we find a balance, all right, in the society that will allow for the freedom or the breathing spaces to allow the two parties to work hand in hand so that we wouldn't have these effects that we are talking about? Because at this time, sending people home do not make sense, because that creates much more problem. At this time, not increasing the wages will mean that the ability to buy the goods and services that will drive you to look at your bottom line one and your economy and your business model will be a reality. Because if I'm selling chicken, and I used to get 10,000 pieces sell per day, and I do my business model on that thinking, and it's now 5,000. What happens to me? And I need to analyze why it has dropped to 5,000. And if we do the open analysis, I am sure that we'll be able to come up with a mechanism that speaks to that particular issue, because we have no control over the prices of goods and services, bearing in mind that we import 90% of our foodstuffs, and therefore our price increases is open to what is happening in the global market. And there needs to be, in my humble view, a different kind of conversation that speaks to that reality.
Well, I mean, we are obviously in very strange times because of this pandemic and the Ukraine-Russia war, which has added on top of it. So it's a very unstable period economically for the planet. So with regard to all of the things that you're talking about, food, goods and services, supply logistics, all of those things which of course impact on the economic viability of businesses, and hence will also impact on wages and employment. Is it the most difficult period you have seen, or the most challenging period you have seen as a trade union leader?
No, I see this as an opportunity for the trade union movement, the government, the private sector to really sit down meaningfully and genuinely and come up with an approach that speaks to what is really happening, how I am affected as a worker, how you are affected as a business, how the government is affected, and see how we can craft a resolution that takes into consideration those realities. And we are mindful in the trade union movement that yes, we are in a global crisis, and therefore we need to look at the economic realities in a different lens. But I'm having said so, we are also saying that what is clear, an infusion of monies in any economy tends for that economy to grow. And we may have to have a different conversation in terms of the kinds of economies that we have. We may very well need to look at, in terms of the food stuff, can we within the CARICOM region start to look at investing in food security? Not Trinidad and Tobago, but I'm talking about the Caribbean region that will assist the region in moving forward. Let us assume that we are able to do that, and we cut off just 35% of the importation, that 35 percentage points, right, that we cut off can now be reinvested back into the economy that will assist in a meaningful way.
I hear you, and it sounds wonderful when you speak about it, but these kind of conversations and these kinds of thoughts that you're talking about are not new in terms of the Caribbean region. There have been previous discussions years ago about that issue of how you can integrate the food distribution and manufacturing and growing of food in the Caribbean region to reduce the import of food across the Caribbean, but it has gotten nowhere. What will make this time different?
What will make this time different? The very sad point that you are making, that the reality of the global market, the reality of the war, where you have Ukraine that produces almost, they say, 85% of the grain, all right, and which we use in a lot of our foods. It will push us, the University of the West Indies, the research, the departments, to now look at new ways of putting food into the system and what we can use as a substitute for the grain. So there are possibilities. We can do research and development that speaks to those things, because we cannot sweep this under the carpet. And I agree with you, because when I had here on my head, we were talking the very same thing that we are saying, but we got oil. Some people believe that was the gift of God, right? We started to suffer from the Dutch disease, and therefore we must learn from those mistakes, because every Caribbean country in one way or the other have suffered. Those countries that talk about sand and sea and their economy is rooted in tourism. I would have seen drops in their economy as much as.
But countries like Jamaica are rebounding. Countries like Jamaica with tourism are rebounding strongly. I want to move the conversation to a different direction, a slightly different direction, because you mentioned the Dutch disease in Trinidad and Tobago, and of course our challenges with diversification. Has the labor movement and your organization had discussions with the labor force on how labor should be encouraging persons in labor who may be employed by the state or private sector to start their own businesses, micro and small businesses, and to be their own captains of their own destiny, so to speak, as opposed to, in addition to, let me not say as opposed to, in addition to advocating for equity and decent wages and stuff, but also looking in the direction of empowering people to take control of their own lives by starting their own businesses and facilitating successful micro and small businesses to be more the captains of their own destiny. Is that something that has been a discussion?
You are knocking on an open door as I speak to you. The National Trade Union Center, we are involved in discussions with the cooperative movement, because it is our intention to open a food co-op, all right? Under the banner of the National Trade Union Center, we have done all the analysis, and we see the possibilities that we can dive into that. You may be aware that under the Siemens Union and the NEGFW, who falls under the umbrella of NATUC, we would have been able to produce houses as a reasonable cost for our workers, and we are looking at that. And as I speak to you, that another project is going to start pretty soon. We would have seen the field attend by OWTU, and you are quite aware that under the SWWTU, when we had the retrenchment in 1995, we would have formed what I want to call companies, which is very unique, which people in the Caribbean is asking me to come.
And that's great. That's very commendable, Mr. Annisette. But what I'm talking about, in addition to that, is actually empowering your workforce themselves to take similar steps. You know, I want to relay a quote from Jack Ma, something I posted recently, a man who is described as the richest man in China, and he said, quote, "If you put the banana and the monkey in front of a monkey, the monkey will choose the banana." I'm not being derogatory here, this is the quote, right? Because the monkey doesn't know that money can buy a lot of bananas. In fact, if you offer work and business to people, they will choose work, because most people don't know that a business can make more money than a salary. And not everyone can be in a business, but because you have influence in such a large cadre, you have the workforce. Just like the union is looking to get into the cooperative business, shouldn't you be encouraging your membership to move more in the direction? Those who can be trained in terms of running their own businesses, micro and small businesses that can possibly grow into medium size, in some instances, larger businesses in innovative, new avenues that have not been able to be successful by the state? Because we keep depending on the state to do this.
All right. Okay. Let me for the public consumption. Let me point it out. Let me point out. Sorry that we would have sent a few of our trade unionists to Jamaica to attend a 5-day course in micromanagement. And there's a reason for that, because you need to inculcate in the minds, as you rightly say, of the workers and the representatives too, that there is a need from a shift, the very shift that you are talking about. We are doing what I want to call financial education and letting workers know that a dollar is supposed to make a dollar for you if you want your money to grow. It cannot be and it must not be that you just work for the government or you work for the private sector and you expect monies to grow. Money don't grow so. And that is the lessons that we are trying to inculcate in the minds of the workers and the representatives that we interface with on a regular basis by way of education. All right, the issue is whether or not there is this will for, as you rightly say, for people to take up that kind of individual approach to your life in the context of how do I make money, and that has been some of the challenges, because people have grown so accustomed to the government hands out that their mind is warped in a particular kind of way, and we are trying to force that dependence syndrome away. Even the question, if I may say, of productivity, and trying to tell workers, hello, we cannot continue to expect to work for 2 hours and get paid for 8, because in effect you are affecting the economy. All right, and that is things that we are now trying to have the kind of conversation with the representatives too, that we have a responsibility. And our responsibility is not only to say wage increase, but the wage increase must have some kind of relativity to productivity. And you do not hear those kinds of conversation coming out in mainstream media. All right, because but I could give examples. Those things what I'm talking about, we would have done that, which is the SWWTU, in 3 companies where we made a level of wage increases was related to how much profit the company made. So there was this incentive where workers will know that if they contribute, there is this possibility of increasing your wages. And I honestly believe from where I see.
But I mean, I'm not meaning to interrupt you, Mr. Annisette, but were the workers part owners of those companies? Because if they were not, then it means that the issue of wealth creation would still make that the SWWTU just part of the employer class. And I think what Paul is talking about is the empowerment of the worker to be entrepreneurial. And by that, it's in a kind of way, it's a catch-22 situation for trade unions, because the more entrepreneurial workers become, the less workers you have joining unions or being part of unions, because they will now be joining that employer class. So if it is that you're talking about the companies that the SWWTU would have formed, the empowerment of the worker would have been, to me, better connected if they were part shareholders of those companies. Were they? Or were you just increasing the level and quality of wages as an employer who understood what was lacking in terms of the employer class? I don't know if you're following me. Are you following me?
Yeah, I am following, but let me answer you, because an economy has several economic dynamics, as you will know, and it isn't one cap fits all. All right, and let me address one of the things that you are making about the trade union. The trade union will always be around, right? If you have capital and you have labor, there will be need for the trade union movement. So even though if Michael Annisette, all right, opens a business, he must have employees. And if you have employees, inevitably employees comes to join union eventually if something goes wrong. So I want to, in my own way, say I don't support because they go into their private business that there wouldn't be a need for the trade union movement. So then that is the first point that I want to make. The second point that I want to make, yes, there are different models. And the model that I was talking about is the involvement of the trade union movement through partnership with private enterprise, getting themselves and wetting their foots into business, where the trade union would have been shareholders within that business. And when dividends are paid out, the union will benefit, and by extension, the workers, because the union now is not only living on union dues, which is almost impossible for the trade union to survive on as I speak to you, but they are now involved in business. And what that does, and I have learned from it too, it gives the union representative a perspective that is totally different, meaning that representative now begins to understand business and all the intricacies that goes with a business.
Isn't it your model is suggesting that the worker is also a shareholder in that business?
Yes, okay. yes, right. Because you have to, because you extended eventually, and one of the things that I was taught is that, listen, you have to set up this company under the company ordinance so that the regulation that govern it will be strictly business. Because the experience in other places is if you leave it under the central executive, most of the people do not understand business, and eventually there is a lot of issues and it leads to the business closing, and I've seen that happen in Trinidad and Tobago. So that is the model that we practice, where the union becomes shareholders and you participate as a shareholder in the business, as opposed to that your whole central executive have to make a decision, which is business decision, which can at times time the approach and the efficacy of what business is all about. And we are learning as we go forward in terms of what kind of business models that is required in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm making the point that is not static. It is dynamic, it is evolving, and the circumstances going to dictate how you do your business model. And that is the point that I want to make, is the circumstances is going to dictate that, and you have to be what I want to call adaptable, right, to the circumstances, because the demands outside there will force you. And if you do not understand that, you will end up like the dinosaur.
Well, I know we are running out of time for this interview, and it will be remiss of us if we didn't touch on the issue of the raising of the retirement age. The Ministry of Finance has obviously been releasing press releases indicating that they are consulting with the trade union movement on the possibility of moving the retirement age from 60 to 65. Has your union been consulted? And what's your position on that?
I'm not as yet. And let me make it clear that the question in the retirement age is specific to NIS, because there is this misrepresentation outside there that it speaks to retirement age generally, because there are unions who are in pension plans, which retirement age is 65, which retirement age is 60. But what the government is talking about is the NIB retirement age, given the fact of the actuarial evaluations and the likely collapse of the system, because there is more people leaving the job market as
well. It connects to the public sector. Well, it connects the contributions to the NIS system, but it affects certainly public sector workers, where the age of retirement is currently 60. And of course, moving it up to 65. I'm talking about established workers, of course, not contract. Because if you're on contract, it doesn't really matter in terms of your retirement.
You see, we have a pension plan regulations as related to the public servants that speak to 65. The only difference that will happen now is that when you could have access your pension benefits from NIS at the very age of 60, they are now saying that you will get that benefit at 65. But if you want to go at 60 still, there will be a penalty attached for leaving the pension plan early. And those are the discussions that we are having. And again, you have to
okay. Can I interrupt you again? I'm just trying to understand it because I know people.
Yes.
If I'm a little confused, I assume other people are a little confused.
Okay,
so you're saying that the retirement age that is being discussed is purely with reference to NIS and the payment of NIS for your level of contributions. Now, I believe the contributions for which you can get your full NIS benefits is 750.
750.
So there are many public sector workers. Well, I shouldn't say many, but a fair amount who would have crossed that 750 easily, and so that the age of, if they raise the age of to 65 in terms of getting the NIS benefit, which is what you're suggesting, it's not that you are required. It's not that you can't retire at 60, but is it? My confusion, if you may permit me, is it that the state is not also considering raising the age of retirement, because there is a mandated age of retirement at 60 right now in the public sector. Once you are substantive, established in a established position, you have to retire at 60. Isn't the state not considering raising that age from 60 to 65 also in tandem?
No, that is not the discussion, and that is why I said, let me put it out there in the public domain. It deals specifically with the NIS, and the NIS based on actuarial evaluations, inability to continue to make those kinds of demands, given the amount of people that is going to leave the workplace and the level of contributions that the NIS will need in order to maintain that kind of
right,
payment.
Which is why I think that the state wants to raise that age from 60 to 65, because they want that additional 5 years of contributions.
That
is not just kicking the can down the road.
No, and then I agree, because you see, this is a social payment as opposed to a pension plan. So let us not mix up the two. A pension plan is totally different than a social program. Okay, because if I'm in a pension, I don't get paid for sick leave, I don't get disability pay, I am not required that if I'm sick, I'll be paid for 52 weeks, and I could go on with all the benefits. We have maternity benefits and all the different benefits. So we cannot mix up a pension plan with a social program that has been instituted by the government. So the conversation is about the social program, where the actuarial evaluation would have revealed that if we continue at this level in terms of the payment, and if we do not have what I will call a large increase in terms of the input of contributions to the pension plan, we can find ourselves in a situation where the government will not be able to maintain or meet their commitments as it relates to the NIB. And that is the conversation that we are having.
Okay. I mean, of course, this conversation is not going to go away because it's ongoing, and we'll see more and more as the issues and clarity of comes to the surface, so to speak. Because I hear you, Mr. Annisette, but that was not my interpretation.
No, I think you are right. That is right.
But I hear you, but that was not my interpretation of it. But
everybody was making that mistake. So I wanted to make the distinction between a social program where I contribute on the employer, as opposed to my individual pension plan that is negotiated between the company and the union on behalf of workers who may retire from the company. And let me put it on the table that in terms of daily rated pension plans, they normally go at 65. And in terms of, as we call the white collar workers, they normally go at 60. Okay? And then that is the fundamental difference between the two programs, basically. One is social, and one is a pension plan that is rooted in law, that is governed by the central bank, and all the required mechanism that you have to put in place to safeguard the pension benefits and rights of the workers.
All right. Yeah, that's where we're going to have to leave it this morning. So thank you so much, Mr. Annisette, for speaking with us on the Power Breakfast Show on Power 102
Recording
Digital.
stopped.
We appreciate your input as usual. But time has crept up upon us, and this is where we have to leave it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michael Annisette.
Yeah, the pleasure is always mine.
All right, all the best to you. All right, let's get into our news brief, all powered by Champlain Auto Services.
This is your news.